Congressional Republicans say they're working on their own police reform proposals. This comes just a day after top Democrats unveiled a set of proposals aimed at national police reform. The White House also says it's working on its own plan. Zak Cheney-Rice writes for The Intelligencer that, quote, the protests in response to the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis have been met with increasingly menacing calls to restore order, but chaos isn't going anywhere soon. Zak Cheney-Rice joins me now. He is a staff writer for New York Magazine's Intelligencer. Zak, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So you have been covering these protests yourself. Tell us about what you have witnessed so far and what appears to be different about this movement.
Well, I've seen them. I should clarify that I'm not on the ground in Minneapolis or elsewhere covering the protests directly, but as an observer and a chronicler of the protests and sort of the historical context in which they're unfolding, one thing that's really stood out is just the extent to which the level of police violence that's greeted them has failed to deter the protests and has in fact further, I think, radicalized the protesters' understanding of the role of police in society and kind of how we should understand their relationship to us in our day-to-day.
You recently spoke with Congressman and civil rights icon John Lewis. What does he believe has changed from the time that he was protesting in the 1960s to today?
Well, what he told me was kind of, I think, what you would understand to be the obvious answer, which is one of the big issues that he was agitating for was greater Black political participation. And that's obviously changed fairly dramatically since his time when, especially in the South, Black people were effectively barred from voting legally. And he was instrumental in organizing and marching in the demonstration, the march from Selma to Montgomery in 1965 that culminated and is credited with creating political pressure to push through the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So the difference between then and now is obviously for him personally, he is now in a position of power, political power that he was not in then, and Black political participation, especially across the South, has expanded dramatically, if not always sufficiently.
And it's interesting because in the course of your interview, it seemed that you were surprised to hear this somewhat optimistic tone emanating from the congressman. What is it that has kept him relatively positive, despite what has been a very familiar story throughout the years of police violence ending in the death of African-American men?
Yeah, I mean, he expressed just a pretty remarkable and unwavering sense of optimism that for him is sustained by a number of personal practices, part of which is faith, part of which is a sort of personal check-in habit he described, and kind of like resetting, understanding that he's playing a long game, and that a lot of the measures that he's pursuing in his legislative career, especially, and also as an activist, are not things that are going to be solved overnight, and just recognizing that as informed by decades and decades of activism. On top of which, in regards to these particular protests, he expressed a lot of admiration for how undeterred people have been by the pushback that has greeted them when they go out to protest from police officers, a lot of public pushback. So he's really encouraged to see a lot of new people going out and protesting and having their voices heard and not being deterred by a lot of the discouraging efforts to stop them.
You also at one point asked him who he feels has been the worst president when it comes to civil rights. What was his answer?
He said the current president, Donald Trump. And I tried to challenge him on that a little bit. I asked him if there were, Trump has been in office for less than 4 years. Other presidents who are kind of well known for being enemies of civil rights gains, Ronald Reagan, even Nixon beforehand, had more time to operate. He was pretty insistent that the degree to which Trump has eroded public trust and his complete disregard for any sustained level of civil rights enforcement has made him kind of a man apart in that fact. And he was pretty unwavering in that.
At the same time, he did express a sense of optimism about leaders that he views today as having the necessary fortitude and energy to pursue some of these very same issues that he's been working to get at his whole life. Can you talk about that a little bit, how he is, even to this day, looking forward and welcoming of all of those folks, no matter where on the political spectrum they may lie, who are interested in the cause of racial equality?
Yeah, I mean, he coming up in the civil rights movement was no stranger to differences in kind of strategic outlook in terms of how some of these often shared goals were to be met, whether it was through nonviolent protest or more militant physical action. But he expressed kind of a real, again, appreciation and admiration for the passion that a lot of the younger legislators in the Democratic sort of Democratic cohort that came into the House of Representatives in 2018, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and others. He has done his best to maintain an open line with them and kind of speak with them regularly about, their frustrations about the sort of reticence of, in their understanding of their party, to move in the direction that they would like it to. And just, I think, continually reassuring them that this is a long game and that they are necessary components of this fight, even if their approach isn't always agreed on by everybody across the spectrum. His theory of, I think, social change comes down to, in a lot of ways, there being need for a lot of different approaches to sort of strengthen and challenge the others in order to ultimately move things forward.
All right, Zak Cheney-Rice, it was a fascinating conversation, providing some context here in what feels like a very urgent moment. Zak, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.